they wound up, of course, like we almost have here in the Monterey Bay on the south end, was that these fish they took up all the oxygen in these lakes, and so they, of course, they died. The birds obviously took part in having some of them as well. But you look at right here, what's going on here, and if you notice, this might look a little bit familiar. This is the Monterey Bay just a week or two ago, and this was an article that someone had published that they saw some fishermen. These boats were just going back into the harbor, and their aft were barely staying above the water because they were just filled with fish. Those are sardines or anchovies, and the rest of them, the fish that they couldn't keep, they just dumped it right back. So they caught all this fish, wound up killing them, and just throwing that back in the ocean. And of course, it's a big waste and everything like that. But we need this life to sustain. We've had all the whales coming by, everything that's been coming by. But anyway, that being said, what happens to these guys in El Nino is that they've discovered is that not only the similarities that you see nowadays, they were picking up. They were picking up in the Galapagos Islands and the Christmas Islands and onward before, and some other little islands out there, that the wildlife, the birds, the sea lions, and some of the seals were having to go further and further out and about to get their food for their pups or for whatever little birdlings, whatever they want to call it, what you call them. And just like we've been experiencing here, they're all done. In fact, the birds that went out to seek food perished. The birds or the pups that were left behind all perished. And of course, we're seeing this now here in the Monterey Bay, which is happening around. Now let's get to this real quick. Now we've heard the monster El Nino. In fact, the National Weather Service had a teleconference just not too long ago, just a couple of weeks ago. I was part of that. Meteorologists all around the country and reporters and a whole lot of news directors, things like that. Everybody was associated with this, and these guys were telling us what El Nino is what's going to happen, what they think is going to happen, and I'll discuss that in a minute. But we have this big drought that's been going on, and you can see what the parched lands look like, and you've already seen, like I told you about I-5, and all of a sudden you've got this water that's coming down on these lands that have been in drought for 4.5 years, maybe even plus for that particular area, and the water just hits the surface and just skates right across. And of course, you've got all these we like to call them floodplains that are just sitting out there that have been parched, and all this water and mudslides and everything else are going to come straight down because the structure of all of these mountains and all of these ridges have weakened, and the mud is just going to everything is just going to just drop down because the gravity would pull it. Now they've made jokes about El Nino being the Godzilla of all things, and they're also talking about this thing called the blob that's also in the northern portion of the Pacific, and that is an oscillation. I didn't want to get into that. It's a little more scientific. In fact, the National Weather Service guys didn't really want to talk about it. It's if you always hear us, we're always talking about the high pressure ridge off the coast is holding on. And sometimes if you were sitting in the office with me and you would see me just go, because you see these amazing storms coming along, and then all of a sudden high pressure just comes back in and just swats it all away. And it's happened so many times that we've seen and lost so much water. Now this new particular blob that's coming along is they're saying that it might just thwart El Nino and give us what we need. It might change the circulation, the oscillation of the ocean, and bring low pressure, which would move high pressure a little bit further away from us, more to our southwest. And then this low pressure would come in, and it would, with the circulation of the low pressure going counterclockwise and the rotation of the high pressure going clockwise, it would drive in the colder storms coming in from the north directly right into our area, and that's what they're hoping that's going to happen. All right, so let's go with the boom or bust for El Nino. Now, as I said, the National Weather Service tried to get ahead of what was going on. The media was just taking over the whole conversation of El Nino because it's a 24-hour news cycle, and what are you going to do, right? So you have to fill the time. So what's been going on is the National Weather Service came in and they said, okay, the major topics about El Nino would happen to be, are we getting rain or are we getting snow? And I want to put that in your head for you right now. And that being said, I want to go a little bit closer to a little bit more of the historical portions of El Nino. Some things you may know already and some things you may not know. As I told you already, 1982 and 83, that El Nino was a complete utter surprise. We learned or we remembered nothing from the past. You go back a little bit further, and there is couple of guys I want you to meet real quick. See if I can get them right here. There we go. Sir Gilbert Walter and Professor Jacob Bjerknes. Actually, this guy was actually a professor at Cal, so that's a bit local. But Sir Gilbert, British of course, was out and about in India. He was trying to figure out trying to learn how to predict the monsoons that happen in Asia. And in doing so, he discovered changes in barometric pressure. And he noticed on the Eastern Pacific, where we are, when there's high pressure, you go over to back to the Western Pacific, and you would find that there's low pressure. And he's just kind of scratching his head as what's going on here? And usually when you have high pressure, you've got the winds that actually go to the low pressure all the time. The circulation always goes into the low and always kind of goes away from the high. And Professor Jacob Bjerknes, he actually came in and filled in what we call the El Nino Southern Oscillation. The Southern Oscillation was developed by Sir Gilbert Walter, because he realized that when the pressure is going this way, or the pressure is high here, low pressure here, the winds go. So we have the trade winds that keep going all the way back over. And of course, you know about El Nino, how things all of a sudden change when the trade winds slow down, and then they just go weak, and then all of a sudden the storms leave the Western Pacific, big storms I might add, and start working their way back across the Pacific, and then that's where we get hit with these things. Now let's put this together. I put a puzzle right there because these guys are the ones that formulated this piece to piece, because clearly we didn't have the internet back then, right? And so communication was pretty much left to circles of the elite educators. So you've got the 1960s. Whoops, I missed a spot. I'm sorry. Let's go back here real quick. I get to Sir Gilbert Walter, and he developed, as I told you, the Southern Oscillation. Here's the high pressure. Here are the easterlies, and they're working their way back, the trade winds. You've got the cold water that I already told you on the Ecuador coastline, as well as California coming down through here. You can see the mid-latitude jet stream in Northern California is well to the north, and then in the Pacific Northwest working its way into the Midwest. So storms are working their way on the northern tier. We have some tropical moisture cutting right through, and of course down to the south in Mexico, and we're pretty much in a mild winter. That's what we normally have, right? But then he also realized that when the pressure changes later on in that, during the Christmas time, these Christmas periods, you start to see these storms work their way back. The trade winds weaken so much that they eventually turn the other way, and then we stretch warmer water right back over to Peru and Ecuador, or South America, and as well. And some of this actually makes its way back and spreads a little bit more so, and that's how we get El Nino. So he discovered the Southern Oscillation. That's just simply what that is. He also realized the thing that I told you about the birds and the seals and everything else when he was studying. Not to mention that when the water is pretty much going this way, with an El Nino, I should say, when the water is going this way, these islands start to see on their western peripheries, they start to pick up at least 10 to 12 inches of water. Their tides get higher. And so when it switches, obviously, the eastern portion, or the western portion, I should say, the eastern portion, the western portion starts to get high as well. When this water during El Nino starts to work its way back to the eastern Pacific, we realize now some areas that have very large coral reefs, all of a sudden they're no longer underwater, and they begin to suffer, and of course that their sea creatures and stuff begin to perish as well in those particular regions. And of course, you know, coral reefs are they're home to very many amounts of species. Of course, you've got the drought that usually goes in Indonesia, Australia, even Hawaii picks up a little bit of drought there as well. Now let's go to Professor Jacob here, Bjerknes here, and he discovered, or put it together this way. He realized something about, not only was there the pressure, there was also the heavy rainfalls that come that are associated with the pressure changes. He also realized that there was a little bit of extra wind. He was the one that came up with the winds, or understanding, I should say, about the counter current, the winds changing, and then the water and everything else changes that way. He came up with the portion of the El Nino, as you can see, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and that's the type of language that we're using right now. I just wanted to let you know what that is all about. Now, getting into what happens here for us, you can see a little bit better. Not only is the water at the surface working its way back to our side of the Pacific Ocean, You also have what we call the Thermic Late. This is the difference between the extremely cold water and the warmer water. The warmer water is getting pushed at the surface by the winds continuously. I keep touching this. Like it's like my board at work. There's no dust. Let's see dust. Anyway, so the warmer water, of course, starts to work its way across the Pacific, and as that happens, we have the upwelling, like I mentioned before, and I'm sure some of you, or more of you that came in, actually understand that, where there develops a tilt. The thermocline starts to get lower here with the warmer water, but it starts to upwell back here, and that's where you're going to see more of the nutrients, more of the sea creatures and everything like that developing. And that continues. It also goes in the reverse when the winds are normal. So you go to El Nino and you look at what's going on, the big storm. What we learned from 1997 is that we didn't really learn much after 1982. That's the big deal. The first thing they learned after 82 was, okay, we don't know anything, and so we need to go back and get in the history books. And that's when they developed this wide world net of information. They picked up from local villages, the local fishermen in Peru and Ecuador. They went back to worldwide records across the board for winds, for fishing habits, for the rains, and they just put it all together. And now they figured out how to discover when this is going to happen. So 1997 we actually knew, but the major problem between 1997 and 2015, they didn't know storms could get this big. They didn't realize that. And now the problem is, it scared them to death to realize 2015, this is a monster. It's huge. It's so much larger. And this already goes to this, you can see this is 1997 working its way across. Now the thing about 92, excuse me, is the reason why it was such a surprise, when you got into January, February, and March, you didn't see the happenings of El Nino. You didn't see the warmer water starting to transfer, the wind starting to transfer, and that's why 82 was such a surprise. It just happened. And now this particular storm is coming out and saying, I'm here, I'm here. And it continues to grow and grow and grow. And I asked if they actually think that this is going to continue. Are these storms going to get larger? Are they going to persist? Is this heat in the Pacific going to stay longer? Because a few months ago back in summer, we broke records just out here with the sea surface temperatures. So this is something that is actually kind of frightening in the way of it. And the whole thing is, I don't think we're really prepared, because you'll see some slides I'll show you in just a moment. And during that outage we had just not too long ago, you remember the power outage? Some of you guys might have had power out for a day or two, the day of inconvenience, I like to call it. I was in Monterey and that morning, and clearly I had no power, and so I went to go get something to eat. I decided I'd go to Marina to get something. Right? That's one of the only places that was open. But there were people in their cars packed like sardines on the street. Tourists, locals, and just folks that were just happened to passing through. Where will we go if there's a tsunami? What will we do? These are things that frighten me in the office, that scare me to death sometimes. All right, so do you have any questions, by the way, before we continue? Yes, sir.
You used the word storm. When you used the word storm, what were you referring to?
Is it El Nino storm?
El Nino is a storm?
Let's show you. It's an actual phenomenon. But you see right here, when El Nino happens, this storm right here, all right, let's say we're in January. This storm would actually be over here. Okay, so here, this is a better way to show you again. We'll back up one more. High pressure. So we're talking mild conditions, warm conditions, kind of like what we had today, beautiful day. Back here, low pressure, we're going to see more of storms, rainfall, copious amounts of rainfall, as you can see in some cases. In fact, some of these islands that I told you about, when the winds shift, they're like deserted islands, technically deserted islands. They are desert islands. They are drought-stricken, and then when El Nino makes their way back, all of a sudden they have this lush, well, flora and fauna, if you want to call it that, and then you've got people going, well, wait a second. I was here a couple of months ago and there was nothing on this island, and now it's just green everywhere. So they went back and checked records, and they realized after several years that there was only a certain particular time where this rainfall would hit, and that was during the Christmas time or the El Nino period. And so to answer your question, these storms transfer along with the heat. The heat itself causes more condensation, you get more storms that come up, and then as you go along, you're going to see bigger storms. Yes, sir?
You know, can a North Pacific high still frighten it off?
The North Pacific high could still frighten it off. In fact, the El Nino that we have right now, it was tracking the same way as all of the other failures that we've had over the last, say, 40 years or so. And the reason why the National Weather Service, all the forecasters were kind of holding back, we don't want to really talk about it, because if you were looking at a graph, 82 and 97 were going like this, and everything else was kind of going like this, and then they all just went like that, and then they all went down. This 2015 El Nino was actually following the rest of these guys, and then all of a sudden it just stepped over, it lurched over back to this, and then started to become, it was in the top 3, and now it's like in the top 2. It's going to get into the top 1 in a month or 2 when it gets a little bit larger. Did that answer your question?
Sounds like there's still a possibility.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about the this joke that they have about Godzilla versus the blob. This high pressure system could come by and thwart it, but there's a low pressure that's supposed to come in and actually displace the high pressure and move it a little bit more to our southwest. So if we're here, the Pacific high would be right here. There's also one on this side, the Azor Bermuda high. This one would kind of sink down just a little bit more, and then this low pressure would come from Alaska and settle in the Gulf of Alaska, and that's where it would guide in these storms. And you notice how the jet streams change a little bit too. You see this polar jet makes a little bit more of a dip down here, and it starts to guide in a little bit higher into Canada, and then you're going to see more of a high pressure ridge develop. They're going to stay in drier conditions. The subtropical jet in itself actually makes a little bit more of a push to North America, and that's how we get our rainfall. Not to mention that a lot of things that we've all really learned, or I've learned over the last few days studying this, is that not only is it just because the storms are crossing the Pacific and they're dropping rainfall for us, it's these storms that come out of the north, right out of the North Pole, these major polar storms. You know, the ones that come down and all of a sudden you're saying, they drop down into Texas, they move all the way across Louisiana, and they get into Florida, and they're like, oh, the citrus crop is going to die, right? Well, those are the ones that come down, and those are the ones that actually cause the most damage. Those are the ones that come in and they kill people, because the storms come in and they're just massive because of the major difference in air temperature. And that's what happened in '82, especially in Peru. They lost some 16,000 people or something like that because of the storms were so massive, and the floodings and all of the rock slides, things like that. Yes?
So I'm just wondering, with an El Nino situation, do islands like Pacific Islands like Hawaii, do they get affected by lots of rainfall too?
That's the whole thing about Hawaii. They're kind of bummed out at this last report that came out. In fact, I'll show you that in a minute, that they're going to go into drought. They're going to have some type of extreme drought working their way. Anybody else on the question?
Are the San Lorenzo River levees any different post 1982?
I've noticed that I can't speak about really, but I noticed they did some work on them yet again. They let water out.
They're dredging it out.
Right, because they were worried about the overflow, and that's the problem, because you've got, like I said, these soils that aren't really going to scoop up a lot of the moisture. You have plants that have withered and died, and people are replacing their lawns and things like that as well, and changing their landscape. And so rain is just going to hit like it's hitting a piece of wood or piano, and just kind of rubbing right off and moving downstream. Yes, hi.
In October of 2013, there was a massive amount of anchovies that were in the bay.
Okay.
And it brought in all kinds of seals and birds and dolphins. Is that part of El Nino as well?
It can be. The National Weather Service guys, the climatic guys, were asked that question too. These things kind of change a little bit from time to time. It depends. It could be. Every time they talk about it in the news, they say it could be a component of El Nino. Yes, it's a possibility, and I can show you why. Let me go down a little bit further here.
Yeah, can you throw something in about the tides? Also, I'm hearing about wind and rain, but how does this all affect the tides?
You mean the actual tides directed by the moon, the lunar tides? Well, that's all gonna, that's something that's completely, utterly different. Yeah, that'll be different. The only thing that will affect the tides is the extra amount of water that comes in, because with this warmer water, you're actually, the heat expands water, so you're actually seeing more water.
Right, like they're saying the Maldives, they're gonna go underwater and things like that.
Some places probably will. Yeah.
What about the red tide?
Oh, I don't like the red tide.
Who does?
I can't tell you about that at all, but that's all based on heat, isn't it? From what I understand, I just learned about this just a few years ago. The red tide, I'm like, I grew up by the San Francisco Bay, so it's just, you just don't go in it. It's just huge. All right, so
Bloom, messing up our crab.
now for folks around here, and I'm glad Janice is here too, because I don't know if you remember this at all. In 1997, when I worked for Janice's family, I went to the tide. Actually, we had a couple of days of rainfall, so there was a little bit of rainfall here, and our general manager at the time, he had a couple of sandbags. He kind of put them right by the door in our back patio. Now the patio itself kind of all drained down on it. You can see it kind of drained down in the center, and there was like this little drainage hole, but it was a German beer garden, so there were leaves about, so, you know, over the course of several years, things kind of back up, right? So all of a sudden, I go there the next day, and I was like, gee, man, you had sandbags, you had a couple sandbags by the door, what are you doing? And he was over by the gate, which is by the sidewalk in the back of the restaurant. It's about 180 yards long, so like whole city block long, plus the extent of the patio. So he's like reaching over and stacking more sandbags. Like he's going up like 2 piles of sandbags. I'm like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, well, I thought we'd be in trouble when I got to work and I saw 2 guys going down the street in a canoe. And this is about maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles away from the restaurant itself. This was 87, where it dipped down. They didn't really think about this with the engineering about having the water come down, because it sinks all down. So it was pretty deep. Not to mention, they didn't plan on any rain, so they didn't dredge any of the sewers, and that's what happens even in this area. This is another part of San Jose. I think this is not too far away from this, on the other side of this minor hill. And these are some of the roads that continue some of the areas that were in higher ground that had that going, probably in Las Gatas. And that's what happens. This stuff is still in my head about this. I still think about this all the time. Now, to answer your question about the tides, some cases here, or let's talk about the ocean. When the heat comes by, you see normal conditions. You've got the cold water. You've got everything is just, everyone's happy with the fisheries and everything. So these guys can just dip down their nets and they're fine. But you get this warmer water, and you notice the fish start to go a little bit scarce. They try to go to a cooler climate, and in some cases they actually leave. Now you've noticed, I mean, a couple of weeks ago we had what do you call it, a pod of sharks now, is that what they call them? Pacifica. 20 of them, 20 great white sharks. When do we ever come across that? And then 2 weeks later they found them, they were down, I believe, in Long Beach or something. They went back down the coast. But you have a whole new set of predators coming in, searching for a whole new type of fish, because most of these cold water fish have moved on to go to cooler water further south or further down in the submarine canyons or a little bit further away. And that's why the birds, like I told you about in the Galapagos Islands, Christmas Islands, they too here now all flee to go to find something extra to eat, to find more food elsewhere. They also, some of them just pick up and just leave. They migrate to cooler climates. And a lot of them actually go further north, which is happening. So that's why we're seeing a lot of the creatures that we normally don't see coming in from South America, Central America, and working their way up to get into cooler climates. Yes?
From the data, is it possible to see about how many months El Nino takes place?
There are some times where an El Nino can actually last 3 years. The longest one has lasted 3 years.
Oh.
But it may not have been a devastating El Nino, but the effects of the warmer water can happen.
What is the cyclic nature over a period of years? Is there a record of that?
Let's see. Most of our weather records date back to about 1850, so we don't go that far back. And like I said before, that they have a lot of the information that they may have found in the 20s didn't carry over into modern times. So they had to go back and create new records or find new records and do the whole research thing. But 1850, 1890 is what I said is probably the best record I know about, at least for the fishermen. More like the villagers, I should say. It's more of a
So
spoken
there
word.
isn't any kind of a cyclic thing that you can...
It is cyclical. It goes every 3 to 7 years in some cases at a time, and then sometimes then we get the La Nina. We're stuck with that for a while, which is the complete opposite of that. But to answer your question, this has probably been going on longer than we really knew, because before 1982, scientists were just, it's raining. I don't know what's going on. And it's kind of scary in itself. Anybody else?
So what is the anticipation for this El Nino?
This one up here. I don't know if you watched a lot of TV when you were a child, but we're Tokyo in this respect. It's not going to be well. I should say, here's the problem. No, to be actually serious, to answer your question, this is where I was going to. This is where the teleconference led us here. Let's move down a little bit more. We talked about the Thermic Late, and this is it right here, the winter outlook. The Weather Service will come straight up and say, my boss was like, all right, hey man, what was the teleconference all about? And I have to tell you, I sat down, I looked them straight in the eye, and those guys, what they pretty much said was, I don't know. Our work here is finished. Because the problem is, this is the major question that perplexes them. Is there going to be more snow, or is there going to be more rain? Now, in the area that we live in, agriculturally based, we need the snow. It'd be great to have the rain. We're all saying we need rain, but the rain is not going to possibly last through the summer if we go straight to drought. We need the snowpack, and a very deep snowpack, so we have rain or rainwater or snow water trickling down from those mountains throughout the summer and into the next rain season, and that's how we keep getting more and more rain. Of course, you want to break the whole cycle, you have to do what Texas has done. You get into a flood. And Jim Vander's why you say it all the time. You say it on TV, you want to get rid of extreme drought, you need a flood. And it's not great to say because things happen when floods occur. Now let's get to the winter outlook for this to let you know what I'm talking about here. Now what they came out with this is great news. This was the great news. The good news first. 50% wetter, there's a 50% greater chance that we'll see more rainfall in Texas going right back. This is something we don't normally see. You get an El Nino, the rain cuts right across the southern tier in Los Angeles, San Diego, cuts into Texas, goes into the Gulf states, and then right back into Florida, and that's it. Boom, done, El Nino. Because the jet stream is kind of coming right in and is streaming right off, right into the Bahamas, and that's done. This El Nino, we're bringing up the rainfall up into the mid-Atlantic states. We're taking the rainfall into the central plains, which you just don't see because normally in this area, they're in some warmer conditions. And then to the west, we're extending it here to the central coast now, and then maybe even north of the Bay Area, just in Sonoma County or so, and maybe a little bit more so up to the north, which is great because if you've seen some of the lakes up there, it would make you cry.
That includes the High Sierra?
Now here's the thing, High Sierra, mostly you've got some of the southern Sierra and then the central Sierra, and they're not so much for Quincy, those guys in the northern portion, but they are there for Lake Tahoe. So the thing is that we're expecting a lot of precipitation. But the thing is, we're also hoping for some major snowstorms, because when the snowstorms come and we have an El Nino, as I told you, that contrast in temperature is going to bring in more rainfall. Now here's the scary part about the whole thing of the winter outlook. You go into it, and the U.S. winter outlook, we're going to have a warmer winter again. And so that means we could see less snow. And that's going to extend all the way down through Southern California, going up in the Pacific Northwest. This is just ridiculous for them. And all the way across into the northern plains as well. Midwest always sees drought when we have an El Nino, and then extending elsewhere. Texas will actually, you guys were asking about Hawaii. Hawaii has a 50% chance of going or staying in drought, as well as parts of Alaska getting into some cases as well too. So that means we're going to lose snowpack. Did you guys know, I found out the other day that we actually here in California have, what do they call them? I'm having a moment right now. The, oh my gosh, Art, come on now. Ice, major ice. Help me out, folks. Glaciers. We actually have glaciers that are expanding here. Did you know? I didn't know that until about a week ago. But now they actually are shrinking. Because they had a guy that professionally, he goes up in the hills and he looks at all these things. He stays up there for weeks on end, and he's realized now that the glaciers that we actually had that were expanding here, which they don't do anywhere else, they are shrinking now as well. So we are going into a warmer winter. Now the problem is, here it is. Say the snow is coming down. With a warmer winter, that means you have higher heights. Say the freezing level is at 10,000 feet, and then the storm's going to be another additional 20,000 feet. Well, the snow's going to fall, right? The snow falls, it gets down to the freezing level, it's still snow, but then it goes into a free fall into a zone of about, say, another 1,000 feet of slightly warmer temperatures. And then it gets down into then it hits a cold, dry spot, so it freezes over again, and then it hits another, say, 1,500 feet before it hits the surface. And then boom, you don't have any snow anymore. That's rain. And that's the problem with this whole thing. We'll get a chance to have some rain, some snow, but with this warmer air, it's most likely that our snowpack is going to be very small again. And that'll keep us in more or less drought yet again. Any questions about that?
Is some of this due to...
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Is some of this due to global warming?
There was somebody that asked that question today. I kind of laughed at. No, I'm just kidding. Possibly. I kind of asked the same question. I was kind of laughed at now. I asked the same question, and they had no answer for me. They had no answer.
So I actually have two questions.
Please.
The first is it warmer because of the El Nino effect? Is that why
it will be? That is one reason. To answer her question, she answered your question for it. It's probably because of the warming climate that we have.
And the other question was, with Texas flooding the way it is that going to recharge their aquifer?
Yes. In fact, yeah, I was saying that's how you get rid of a drought. In fact, I'll show you that in a second. But I just recalled something to answer your question again. This El Nino, there's one thing about it. Most El Ninos, you just kind of see them happening. It's just like a light switch. When it turns into January, or February, that you just flip the switch and it's done. This particular El Nino, it is so large. It is so large that it's not going to just turn off. It's going to keep going into probably late spring. So we're going to see, that's how we're going to see some warmer temperatures and possibly more rainfall, but not so much the snow.
When do they think the start will be?
The start of this, technically speaking, it's already in effect. I mean, I know we have the oscillation, southern oscillation going the other way, and it's slowly going to work its way back, but we're in the period now where we're supposed to be seeing the storms come in. In fact, we had one come in today in Northern California. It just stayed up there and then it pushed off to the east. It was a mix of rain and snow. Then the next one comes in for Sunday night, getting into Monday. So I'm not saying the storm door is open yet, but it's getting there.
You mentioned the aquifers in Texas. How about the Owens Valley, where we've had the water, levels declining rapidly in recent years due to the use of that water for Southern California?
Oh, yeah.
But that's a massive, but if it's raining a lot, wouldn't a lot of that water go into the...
You would think unless it's been diverted or it's being held up by dams. I mean, there's a picture we have, like from, I'd say, like 1950s of the picture of all the water it's on the back of the door of the weather office. No one really knows it's there, and I'd like to really take it home. It shows all the different rainfall coming out of the Sierra, or the ways, the waterways for that to happen, even the ones going to Southern California. In fact, it was the map that they used just when they were developing the blueprints for that water to Southern Cal. And all the different types of waterways and the dams and everything, that's why I'm starting to understand why people are like, hey, oh man, the little white salamander, the white spotted salamander, we're going to kill them. But yeah, everything that we have where we keep water is at a major deficit. Even the folks that have their own farm with their own well, they have major deficits right now. So we're in an extreme drought. And I'd go into politics, but I don't even want to talk about building a pipeline over the biggest aquifer we have. I don't understand that, because you don't have oil pipes that don't leak. Oh, there's a question back there.
On these models you're showing,
Yeah.
are they based on historical records or?
These models?
What's being used without getting too technical?
Yeah.
And then once you answer that, what's the probability of the accuracy
Of the forecast? All right, last year when the National Weather Service came out with El Nino, they're like, it's gonna be a big El Nino, and I said, no, it's not. So, it's just one of those things where you just kind of feel it. I don't know, I haven't had my serendipitous moment yet. It's a matter of getting enough information to get to that point where you can pick that up to answer your question. Where do I get this information? Where is this all based on? This is actually, this is from, I think this one's from NOAA, but this is all from space. These are pictures of what it looks like right now, or I shouldn't say right now, back in July. So right now this is a little bit larger. Where's the other one?
And the orange we're looking at is just warmer water?
You know, this right here?
Yeah.
It's warmer water. And the funny thing is, I used to look at this thing and I'm like going, it used to confuse me to no get out. It's like, all right, well, you say in the regular season that the water is supposed to be warm and the warmer water goes that way, right? And then, so if this is El Nino, wouldn't there be like more of the wider part here and then the thinner part there? And then what I've learned is that this is actually, you got El Nino that comes out here. This water, it's thin and it goes out. I mean, it's thin and it continues to go across, straight across. In fact, let's get no, I'm gonna just use this. So what happens is it hits the Peruvian and Ecuadorian, or I should say, it hits South America's continent, and then it expands, and it just keeps expanding and expanding. So this is actually a narrow strip of moisture, some 1,200 miles or something like that, across in some facts. And then it just continues to get larger. It goes down the coast. It goes to Central America, and then it makes its way back up to the Baja. You can actually see it right there by the Baja Peninsula, right there. So right now, this thing, I mean, look how big that is. And that was back in July. It's actually much larger now, and it will continue to be larger. Questions? So we did the winter outlook for you, and now let's talk about drought. You were asking me about Texas. Now Texas actually...
The question.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So when can we expect the most amount of water, and are we expecting floods like they're having like in Texas?
Wow, if I could tell you that, I'd have Al Roker's job. Over here right now. Wow. It's going to rain Sunday and Monday. What was your second question?
Are we expecting floods like they're having now in Texas?
I would hope so, but we don't know. I mean, right now we can't handle floods like that. I mean, they can't handle floods. I mean, the thing that really hurt them the most is that they went into a week where they were having like 3 days of rain. There was a day of light rain, and then there was 3 days of heavy rain, and then all of a sudden, Hurricane Patricia showed up, the largest storm ever in this hemisphere, and that just trained that moisture right across Texas, and it just dropped so much. What were they picking up? I believe it was somewhere around about it was like half an inch or something like that per hour, maybe even more than that, and it just continued to just fall. So for these guys, they're going to they've picked up so much water, or they're expecting to pick up so much water for Texas in some of this greenish area you can see. That means they're going to have their drought likely removed. So some parts of Texas will probably be out of drought. And look at this, California. Actually, we'll have our drought will remain, but it will likely improve a little bit more so. So it would take an actual major flood, maybe even 2 major floods to get us out of a drought. Or extreme drought, exceptional extreme.
Where's the Monterey Bay on?
Right there. Yeah, we're right there. And fortunately, it's gotten a little bit better for folks up there in the North Bay. They've picked up some good rainfall. They always get a lot of the rainfall. And it just, like I said, it pains me when you see a storm come in and all of a sudden high pressure starts building up again and it just swats it away. It's just like it just kind of cups it, takes it away. It's just, it's mind-boggling how that happens. Now, we've had some extreme weather going on here, and we do have our agricultural stuff. This is a picture I took of one of the fires that was going on out in Monterey. It looked like an atomic bomb had hit it. And this was the funny thing was, I went to my boss and I was looking at it, and it was about day big or so. I'm like, hey, I think this fire started again. They're like, nah, it did, nah. 15 minutes later, it's twice as big. I'm like, I think the fire started again, and it actually picked up another spot, but that's what's going on. We've had the extremes. Now, when it comes to fire, these burn scars that happen, you always hear people talking about burn scars. There's no vegetation to suck up that water. There's the soil itself has been scorched, and it's all just going to run off. And we've had so much of that going on. Folks in the Central Valley, they're doomed. Folks in the northern portion of by Healdsburg and further northward, when the fires, when the rains come, they're just going to be inundated with water. There's just nowhere for this water to go. It's kind of sad. And of course, we need the water because of the agricultural industry. And that being said, take a look at some of the things that we've experienced over the last few years I've been here. This is Patricia, and that's just a mass. There was one time I was doing the morning weather, and I was talking about something that was going on over here. And you know how we have our little KSBW bug right there in the corner? Well, just where you guys were probably, it was covered for you, but it wasn't covered for me. And I saw this flash of red, and I was like, that's a big storm. And I'm like, I better check that out. And that's when, it was before even a lot of the news picked up on it yet, but it was, because it was still crossing over the Yucatan Peninsula. But that is an amazing storm. The reason why those folks survived most of that is because, let's see if we can give you something a little bit better to see this with. It's because it paralleled the coast. Back a little bit further here. Had it been like normal hurricanes, like you'd see on the East Coast there, coming straight at it, had it been perpendicular to the coast, it would have just wiped them out completely. But it went along with the mountain chain, so all the stronger winds were going along a lot of the areas that are in between a lot of the mountains, so in the canyons. That was very lucky for them. Some of the other things, are there any questions right now? Any other questions?
Does the hurricane, is that an effect of El Nino in the Pacific? Even though it's happening?
There is some, I'd say yes, because of the warmer water that we have right now, and plus it was coming out of, most of that moisture came out of the Gulf of the Gulf of Mexico as well. So yes, we do have the warmer waters. It was sustained a lot more so because of that water. Now you guys might remember this one here. This was a couple of years ago actually, where there was just massive amounts of water coming in from the Pacific, and it was subtropical moisture, and it was a direct hit right over the Santa Cruz Mountains. In fact, you can see there's Boulder Creek, it picked up just 3 inches, and Ben Lomond picked up 4 inches of rainfall. Over in Watsonville, it was a couple of inches, and I think that was just in 3 hours period, something like that. Yeah, that was a fun day because it continued on. A guy calls up and says, "Hey, I sent you guys a picture. You guys have to check this out." I got home from work. This was in Ben Lomond. He's got a boogie boarding down the street, and I was thinking about this, going over this, and I'm thinking to myself, think the city fixed that street? Are they going to have that much problems when they get some heavier rain? And in fact, this was the second part of that same storm. Now, right here you can see as it's going over the Big Sur coast, that actually was a tornado watch. There was a funnel cloud that developed just 10 miles off the Big Sur, off of Point Sur, and we were just holding on and kind of, is it going to hit Big Sur? Is it going to? But it fizzled out just within a 5-mile distance of getting to the coast.
What year was that?
I think if I remember correctly, that was about 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And these are some of the photos that came in from the I-5 rainfall that came through.
Just last week.
This is last week, yeah. And this is also from that as well, as is this. And then, just the other day, that last rainfall we had, it was 8 hours of snow. It was unbelievable. 8 hours of rain and 8 hours of snow. It was just fantastic. Monterey had picked up about half of what we already had for this year, which was only 3 inches. from January, starting from January 1, and we picked it up in 8 hours, less than 8 hours, actually. That was pretty amazing that we sent that much that first. And a lot of these ski resorts are opening up in a couple of weeks.
They have a lot of snow in Mammoth, I heard.
Yes, Mammoth picked up a lot of snow. In fact, there's a friend of mine, she lives in Truckee, she just posted a whole bunch of dates for the ski resorts that are opening up. Were there any other questions here for you about this? I know I didn't go into the oscillation, or I should say the blob, because the blob, that's like a flipping a coin and seeing if it works.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So you talked about, some of the flooding that'll occur because of the rains, and we can expect landslides most likely, some infrastructure problems. What about coastal flooding? Will the El Nino storm surges, affect our beaches, access to piers, et cetera?
It won't be so much as a storm surge, because when hurricanes occur and that storm surge comes, it's like a larger amount of water that comes in, and that's a large amount that just kind of continues to push across the ocean and drives up more height. So usually that'll like pop up about 15 feet above the normal tide, and that would be an issue. If there was a hurricane probably working its way a little bit closer up the Baja Peninsula, then we would see a greater swell, and we could say, yeah, to answer your question in that respect, it is a possibility we could see some extra flooding, but not like the tsunami that we had here a while ago that passed through the Santa Cruz Harbor. What we'll see is the expansion of a little bit of water, maybe a foot, if possible. Usually you get about a foot when it comes to El Nino. Anybody else? All right.
So they don't anticipate flooding in Santa Cruz?
No, I would not say that. I would anticipate, take care, thank you so much. I would anticipate flooding everywhere, just in case, just to be prepared. That's, girlfriends of the past of mine, they hate when I say that, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But it's like, when you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere and you're like, hey, wow, you brought games we can play? Hey, oh my God, you don't get stuck with it. All right, so any other questions?
I got a question. You talked a lot about the rain, but how about the winds and that kind of effect? Would you think?
The trade winds are always considered some weak winds. Here, I'll move it up. The winds will be more associated with what we normally see for winter. I'm sure, and I don't think, as I was told, that there will be, you can say that there will be some snow events, there will be some rain events, there will be some big events, but not all of it is El Nino. That's something that you guys should know, to take away with this. A lot of the things, there's things that usually happen. You've got some extra warmth in the air, extra moisture in the air. You're gonna get some good storms, especially if you have extra heat. So, and you're getting that cold air coming down. In fact, there's some storms that are gonna pop up probably right now in the Central Plains because colder air is coming in off this last cold front that came through, and there's a mix of rain and snow. That all the rain that we just had the other day, that's all moving in, and of course there's more of that jet stream, subtropical jet that's bringing in warmer air. And so from Texas into Louisiana, and into New Orleans, not New Orleans, but into Arkansas, we'll probably get hit more. So let's see some thunderstorms out of that. That's just what happens.
Are they attributing this crab poisoning to the warmer water then?
Ooh. I have no idea about that. I heard about that today, and not to scare people, but I was working in a restaurant not too long ago, and there's a guy came in. He was from Eureka. He said that he works in a fish market up there, and he says because of Fukushima that this will probably be the last year that we'll have Pacific fish to actually eat. And a lot of chefs were like, nah, I don't think so. But what he did mention was that he said that the U.S. government had actually raised the toxicity levels of nuclear waste, I guess, in fish. So the fishing industry wouldn't go under because of that, just in case. The crab warnings did come out, and that they were talking about that on the radio when I was coming over here, and those neurotoxins that can actually really mess you up. In fact, one lady was saying that it could damage your temporary or your short-term memory. You would know who your family would be. You would know, your history of the past. People you hated back in high school and bullied you, but you would know where you parked your car. Yeah. So what they have is this is for right now they delayed the recreational crab season. The commercial fishing season is supposed to start next week, so I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Still don't know.
Yeah.
They're doing tests on the demonic acid. Conjugate vegetables. Yeah.
Why not? Why not? I have a box of spinach in my thing just in case. Are there any other questions? Hi, sir.
I look at the marine forecast a lot, and
Wasn't my fault.
I've noticed in the last maybe 3 or 4 years that it's not as accurate as it used to be.
For the TV station or?
No, the NOAA forecast. Do you have any idea why that might be?
Yeah, no, not really, but I would say, how do I answer that? Because sometimes, I don't even know if the office around here does it. The office in San Francisco might do it. I'm not sure who does that. In fact, I never asked them about that.
That was one of my theories.
Yeah.
They closed down the office that used to do it, and they moved.
Well, yeah, they closed down one of the offices. There is the office by the airport in Monterey. Really nice folks there. As far as that's concerned, I mean, that's what my mother used to say. You want to know about the weather? Look out the window. It really tells you a whole lot. Like you look out, there are high clouds out there, and you're like, okay, well maybe a cold front is coming or came, and it did happen today, right? And then you look up, and you look at the sky, you look at the type of sky you've got that low sun, you have clearing skies in some cases, maybe a little filtered sunshine. It must be November, you know? A couple of weeks before, and you're like, orange sky, it's gotta be October. So these are the little things that, you guys all know that stuff. Questions? Wasn't there somebody that was younger than me that was over there? You have a question?
Well, my parents told me to wait until the very end.
Let's see what we got here.
Hard one.
And questions?
It's not really a question. I want to be a meteorologist when I grow up.
Really?
And I plan to take notes on how strong the storm that's going to hit us this winter anyway.
All right. Right
We did
on.
that last year when we went down the Rio de Mar.
Yeah? Good for you. Come visit us at the station. In fact, Lauren Sieber, who was my former partner when I worked the weekends, she was about your age when she went to visit her aunt that was an anchor at the station, and she took a picture. She's like, someday I'm going to work in this chair. And she took a picture of that, and she's sitting in that chair.
It'll be even cooler graphics.
Yeah, she's really good at what she does. Were there any other questions about anything about this weather thing that we're going on? I don't know if I covered it all for you, but try to make it as less scientific. I try not to be smarter than my pay grade.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Before you do this, I just wanted to congratulate all of you residents here that actually just kicked tail on conserving water. I mean, you guys did. I mean, you showed the world what to do, how to do it. Well done. Well done.
Bel Air, boo.
Thank you
so much. I mean, thanks for all the news, some of it not so good, some of it good. We really want to thank you for really making this come alive and interesting to us. This was put on in a joint collaboration with the Santa Cruz Public Library and the Santa Cruz Children's Museum of Discovery in the Capitola Mall. We're about to celebrate our first year anniversary. And every month we do a citizen science program, and next month, on the 3rd, we're at the Scotts Valley Library. We'll be having a really interesting program on the California moray eel. One of the UCSC graduate students who's been studying the jaw of the moray eel in Southern California will be doing that. And so I'd like to leave these up here with you, and check our website, which is on the back here, the Children's Museum. We really want to thank you, and we also have partnered with the Red Cross, and we have literature there about disaster preparation. Not that we want to go in that kind of negative direction, but yeah, they wish that they could have been here tonight, but instead they sent their literature. So, and thank you all for participating, especially.
All right, thank you all.